Thanks very much for the question, and hello, everyone. Whoever has actually advised on legal matters in Greece, in the energy sector, can understand that the energy market can be seen from two perspectives. There is one international, external, outbound perspective, which basically involves relationships with third countries. It involves foreign investment. It involves the upholding of EU and international law. But there is also the domestic part, the internal part. And it would be an actual fallacy to think that we can turn the country into a regional energy hub without tackling the domestic problems that the energy market faces in Greece. And to name a few of the issues that we are currently facing is the long-term energy plan of the country, energy sufficiency, over-dependency on lignite maybe, and also, like old infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a common denominator in those two perspectives, and that common denominator from a legal perspective as well is the role the state plays, the role the government plays. It's obvious that for historical reasons in the EU, but also in Greece, energy has been a very heavily regulated market, and that actually determines the future of investment in this jurisdiction, but it also determines the strategy that international investors want to deploy when they are making an energy-specific investment. Let me briefly tackle 5 areas where actually this role of the state is obvious, and actually this determines the regulatory challenges as well.
Very briefly.
Very briefly. So the first sector would be upstream oil and gas. Obviously, that's it has been addressed previously. It's a marathon. You're not speeding there. However, we don't want to add more time to that. So the current regulatory framework does not really permit international investors to move very fast and actually get the permits, get the concessions, and move forward with the exploration. So it's very important to actually mainstream the process on a one-stop basis. Going to the pipelines, to the midstream aspect. You've heard all things about the developments, IGI, ICGB, EastMed, everything's going very well there. There is one thing though, this whole initiative, the midstream initiative, is really facing the issue of the sui generis bureaucracy. That's how I like calling it from a legal perspective. Because you don't only have a procedural bureaucracy, but you also have a substantive bureaucracy. You don't have the right personnel, you don't have the right number of people, but also the adequately trained people to actually deal with those sort of applications, regulatory applications. And I got a good example there. For a company to get an INGS license or a TPA exemption, the procedure is pretty much the same around Europe, in all EU member states. However, in Greece, it usually takes more time because we don't have the right personnel to actually process that. And that's something we need to look at in the near future. Renewables, another very important sector. There is something very important about renewables. If a project is not licensed, fully licensed, then it's not marketable. So if you ask a foreign investor about a renewables project, a wind project or a solar project in Greece, they will tell you, is it licensed? If it's not licensed, then there is no discussion. And it takes so much time to get all these projects licensed that eventually some of them become non-marketable. So again, you need mainstreaming the regulatory process, coordination between the Greek energy regulator and the Ministry of Energy, very close cooperation there, and of course, reform in the justice system. You get all this litigation. Greeks are very litigious, we know that. You get all this litigation that actually has as a result stalling the process of regulatory approval, especially with environmental concerns. Indeed, environment should be part of the broader strategy. What I'd like to say here is that the approval of the IGI environmental terms is a very positive step. However, we need to also look at that from an EU perspective. And the fact, for example, that the EU sometimes proceeds with regulatory enforcement, such as antitrust enforcement, in a limbo without really understanding the framework of the sector, that's something that also Greece has to take up with the European institution and with the European Commission. Last but not least, very important point about the banks. We cannot have an energy hub and a viable energy sector in Greece without the banks supporting it. And from a legal perspective, we have to resolve the NPE issue with the Greek banks. This is the finance sector. It's a completely different sector, but they're very interrelated. We see the initiative of the international investment banks, the European investment banks, but this cannot be standalone. It has to be supported by Greek banks, and in order for the Greek banks to do that, we need to make sure they get rid of their NPE exposure. Summing up, and to round this up, can Greece turn into a regional energy hub? Yes, it certainly can, but with the right multidimensional approach. Are there regulatory and legal challenges? A lot of them, but the answer is not deregulation, is actually better regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you.